Sorry. 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 Edward Norton writes the screenplay and directs Motherless Brooklyn, where he plays a private detective who is trying to solve the murder of his friend. Norton's character Lionel has Tourette syndrome, and personally, as somebody who also has that, I'm grateful that he is bringing light to this syndrome in this film. Mine is just muscular tics, but Norton's character has both muscular and verbal tics, and it's combined with OCD. He does a really good job of explaining how it feels and what it's like in his head, and then also the fact that the more he fights it, the more he just tries to control it, the worse it becomes. Now, that's not what the film is about, but it is a major characteristic of the character of Lionel, and it does play a large part to him in the story. It also provides a little bit of humor to the story as well. This neo-noir film has a lot of the feel of an old crime drama. I mean, you have a lot of elements to the story, you have a slower pace, and then you even have these deliberate pauses within the story just for music to play or for reflection or whatever that is. And so it is a modern day crime drama, just told in the style that we would see if it was a black and white movie. Now, while that is kind of cool, it is also a little bit of a weakness to this film. We get some elements that are not fully necessary for the action or even to push the story along because they were explained through narration. And the narration is not weird, it's totally in place for how the movie's going, so that when you have this extra action going on that just reinforces what you've already heard, it just feels kind of redundant. Like, one example is the other PIs that work with Lionel. Now, they do add a little bit to the story, but the amount of time spent on them and their interactions together, and then even some offshoots of stories that begin to go on, don't really serve any purpose other than to add a little bit of time to this and to give maybe a beat to the film so that, you know, we're chugging along and then, oh, we're going to slow it down just a little bit. Because they're not even like red herring distractions or misdirections. They're just there. Now, one huge positive in the film is the performances. I mean, they are outstanding. Everybody does a really good job. I mean, first off, Norton, who is the star of the film, along with being the director and writer of it, he knocks it out of the park. I mean, he is super convincing, like I said, with his Tourette syndrome, but also just in every other nuance that he brings to the character. He has a photographic auditory memory, and then he just has certain eyes for detail. And I just love how his whole character comes together. We also get really great stuff from Willem Dafoe, Gugu and mbatha-raw, Alec Baldwin, and Michael Kenneth Williams. There's also some good stuff from Bruce Willis and Bobby Cannavale, further limited contributions. I mean, Bruce Willis is the best friend of Edward Norton, who gets murdered, and that's who Edward Norton's character is trying to solve, and what he's trying to solve, what the entire mystery surrounds. But Bruce Willis, he's just kind of in it at the beginning. Now, another great thing too is the set pieces and the set design in this. I mean, it really makes it look like New York City in the late 1950s. There are tons of cars, tons of just street side action going on, and every bit of it feels authentic. He did a really good job when crafting this and just really transporting us into that world and into that time. Soundtrack is great in this also. Now, I'm not a jazz fan, but if you are into jazz, you'll probably like the soundtrack even more. I mean, it's so much in there that it's almost an additional character to the film because it just helps with the mood. It's there when dialogue is not happening, and it definitely sets the tone for the scenes. I don't know if it was my theater specifically or if it's just how everything was mixed, but at some points the dialogue was being drowned out a little bit by the music, and it didn't seem like that was intentional. Like, we were supposed to be able to hear the dialogue. Now, I know that there are other times in this film, as well as other films, where the music ramps up and it covers what the actors are saying because that's an effect. But in these instances, that's not what was seeming to happen. I was struggling to hear because it didn't go like silent, because that also happened. Edward Norton did do some of that where the music ramped up and you just see some interactions of characters, but you're not meant to hear what they're saying. But then there was also the parts where I think you were meant to hear what you're saying, but I couldn't really hear it. And then also some other times where, again, it could have been my theater, but just that sound felt echoey. Like in one scene, they were in this big tiled room. And so of course you would hear echoes to it, but the echoes weren't consistent. And so that's what was really odd to me. Sometimes it would be like the microphone was right up close to their face and picking up just every bit of them without any type of reflection. And then other times they would turn their head a little bit, still the same distance from the camera, and you would get some echo. And so it was really weird to me. And so maybe that was just my theater. So don't discount the movie just solely based on that part of it. But for me, it was a little odd. As I'm sitting there listening to it, I was like, oh, this is just, it seemed a little unpolished. Now, I don't believe that everybody is going to find enjoyment out of this film. I mean, the pace is slower, and it does seem like it just kind of is aimless at times. But that can also be some of the charm to it, that it does harken back to those old black and white crime dramas. And so if you really enjoyed those, I think this one can satisfy an itch for you. It's 2 hours and 24 minutes, and that does seem long, especially as the pace is much slower. I didn't totally mind it though, because the performances were so good. The climax though wasn't too shocking, wasn't too impacting. It wraps up and it answers all the questions. It just kind of felt a little blah. Even the mystery wasn't as compelling as I think it could have been. And maybe that's just because it wasn't told as effectively as it could have been told. So with all this back and forth of me, you're probably wondering, well, did you like it? Did you hate it? Well, I certainly didn't hate it. I mean, the performances alone are reason not to hate this. It's a well-crafted film, and it's certainly well acted. But on the other hand, it is meandering at times, and just some of the story elements I didn't feel were necessary and just felt extraneous to me. There's no sex or nudity, there is profanity and some violence. I give Motherless Brooklyn 3.5 out of 5 couches. So what's a good neo-noir film that you can recommend to me? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.